Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation, How Safe Are Our Athletic Venues in 2014. Before we begin, I did want to touch on a few points. We will be recording this webinar and will be emailing the recording to all attendees tomorrow morning. In order to receive CLE credits, you must chat the CLE passcode when requested during the webinar, in addition to completing the survey at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar will explore the safety concerns of athletic fields and gymnasiums. Mr. Bowler will discuss both the safety codes and regulations on the state and federal level specific to buffer zones around courts and basketball courts, soccer and baseball fields, and padding requirements for goalposts. He will also outline the safety concerns for bleachers, signage, and other safety concerns set by the American College of Sports Medicine and the National Strength and Conditioning Association. This webinar will contain two question and answer segments where attendees will be able to submit questions to Mr. Bowler in the chat feature. To give you a little background about our presenter, Tom Bowler, he received his Bachelor of Science in Physical Education from the University of Connecticut. He then received his master's degree in Physical Education from Springfield College. Mr. Bowler also has a Certificate of Advanced Graduate Studies from UConn in the area of Administration and Supervision of Special Education. He taught elementary physical education for 33 years in Vernon, Connecticut. Mr. Bowler has also been a high school coach in the areas of cross country and track. Within his background, he was an adjunct at two state universities in Connecticut. He taught a graduate course on sports law and an undergraduate class on tort law and physical activity to exercise science majors. At one university, he served as an adjunct in the capacity of the Director of Intramurals and Recreation. Mr. Bowler has been an expert witness for plaintiff and defendant attorneys throughout the United States for approximately 22 years. He has handled approximately 350 cases within that time span dealing with physical education, recreation, athletics, and playground cases. For those of our attendees who require a code word for tracking purposes, the passcode word for today is athletic. During the presentation, we will take short breaks, and during that time, we will ask that you enter this code into the chat feature for CLE reporting purposes. The chat feature is located to the right of your screen. Please remember that if you are applying for CLE credit, you must log onto your computer as yourself. If you have attempted to log on and received an error, or if you are listening via telephone, please email the passcode both times it is requested, and please state the time that you have entered your code in that email. Also, at the end of the presentation, there will be a survey that will pop up on your screen, and we ask that you complete that survey as well in order to get the CLE credits. As a provider of CLE credit, you are required to have supportive information that you have attended, and in many states the survey is required. Mr. Bowler welcomes your questions, so please use the chat feature to submit your questions throughout the presentation. We will take the intermittent breaks so that Mr. Bowler can respond. Thank you again all for attending, and I will turn the presentation over to Mr. Bowler. Hold on, Tom.
Hello.
There you go. Hi, Tom.
Hello. Okay, hi, how are you? I just saw the green ball go over to my name, so I wasn't quite sure I was on or not. How safe are our athletic venues in 2014? Certainly, we can argue the fact that they're a lot safer than they were probably a century ago, but certainly they can be a lot safer in 2014. We're going to take you through in an hour some of the hot-button topics in athletic venues. Certainly I can't pretend in an hour to cover everything adequately. As was mentioned previously when I was introduced, I used to teach a graduate course in sport law, and there's a lot of risk management issues that would be required to be covered within a semester at the college level. So certainly within an hour, We'll try to hit on some of the items, but certainly in not any great length or depth. My objectives for you this afternoon will be to explore safety within the gymnasiums and athletic fields, and to review various agencies which have standards for facilities, field, health, and fitness facilities. To explore some of the building codes, we won't get into building codes in great depth at the state and federal level, but we'll touch upon a couple of codes, and we'll touch upon a couple of fire codes that are important, certainly when you're having students in a gymnasium. The safety concerns certainly regarding the standard of care of glass requirements we're going to cover, the standard of care in regard to padding for walls on the perimeter of a gymnasium, the standard of care for padding the underneath part of a backboard where someone might hit their head or hit a shoulder if they're that tall when they jump up. That's certainly of concern at the elementary level. And also safety concerns on buffer zones around fields and courts, and certainly concerns with a dividing gymnasium wall or curtain. So these are some of the concerns that we're going to be addressing this afternoon. Setting the standard of care within venues. There's a number of agencies. I couldn't put them all on this one slide, but you should be aware if you take on an athletic case, certainly there are groups that are very prominent that you should be going to. For example, the American Alliance for Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance. Commonly, the acronym is AFERD, or it has recently changed within the past year to the Society of Health and Physical Educators. SHAPE is the acronym now. So that is certainly, they're used interchangeably, but we're kind of trending over toward SHAPE instead of the AFERD nomenclature. The American Society for Testing Materials International, ASTM, certainly is quite important in setting standards, a consensus standard setting group, as many of you know, out of Pennsylvania, West Pennsauken, Pennsylvania. The National Collegiate Athletic Association, the NCAA, the American College of Sports Medicine, the National Federation of State High School Associations, the National Strength and Conditioning Association, just to mention a few. One I did not mention there certainly is the Amateur Softball Association of America, USA Softball. And that is a one to turn to if you have a softball case, because they actually put out a risk management type of safety checklist that they would like to have their participants check through, either coaches or the manager of the field, the leafee, or the umpire, and certainly that would be another group to go to. Before I came on the webinar this afternoon, I received an email from ASTM, and it was interesting that they were indicating 40% of standards change annually. So therefore, it's important to keep abreast of standards, what's happening in the field, and obviously apply the appropriate standard to the current year of your particular case. We're going to cover some glass issues with doors. Certainly, this is a physical education complex at the high school level. You can see it's the end of a basketball court. You can see the double doors with a pane of glass, and it was reinforced with embedded wire, as many glass venues were many years ago. We have to recognize the fact that wire glass is 1/2 as strong as regular glass. 2,500 accidents in schools alone occur each year. That's a significant number, and that's probably a conservative number. I read that recently on someone who's doing a survey. So 2,500 accidents in schools alone each year just in wire glass issues. I've had approximately 3 cases dealing with glass issues. One in this particular case in Connecticut, I won't mention the town, where a boy was running down a ball that was rolling in a basketball physical education class, and he put his wrist through the glass pane, and it was also reinforced with wire. I have another case ongoing right now in Georgia involving, again, a basketball situation where a youngster had put his both wrists through a door and received a serious injury from glass and the wire that was embedded. I had a third case involving a wrestler that was working out in a cafeteria, and he ran and put his arm through the glass in the cafeteria. So it's significant to note that certainly glass is an issue. Also, Tom Sawyer, emeritus professor at Indiana State University, pointed out in one of his books that in the activity areas outside the gym, usually you have trophy cases, and sometimes these are not built with safety glass, and that's very, very important to note that certainly the glass in other venues around a gymnasium sometimes don't adhere to safety glass requirements. You might be interested in knowing that the International Building Code in 2003 banned wire glass in impact areas of schools, and in 2006 the International Building Code in 2006 banned it in all new buildings. However, unfortunately, the code does not require replacement if it was built prior to 2003. So we have all this information out there, and people should know that this glass is dangerous, and people sometimes just turn the other cheek. The reason for the wire in the glass is not for anything to do with safety. It has to do with fire. And regarding fires, if the glass shatters, therefore this glass won't be shattering all over the place. It will obviously catch within the wire. So that's the reason for wire glass, the wire being in glass. It's not there for any kind of safety value other than the safety in a building catching on fire and the glass doesn't shatter and the shards don't go spraying all over the place. This is a case I had in the cafeteria that was used for an activity. The wrestling coach had put mats across the cafeteria floor. He was running across the floor with the mats on the cafeteria floor and impacted his arm in the glass. Not a pretty sight. I didn't put that shot on of the youngster that had all kinds of stitches in his arm, but he had several stitches in his arm after going through the glass. I might point out that the rebound effect you have with glass is the arm goes through initially, but then you have the rebound effect that the participant withdraws the arm, and then you have results in soft tissue, the flaps of the skin being obviously ripped, torn, lacerated through the wire that's also hanging and dangling in the glass at that point in time. So you have a twofold effect here. Not only does the glass have shards, but now as the rebound effect, as the youngster tries to withdraw the arm, wrist, whatever, you have the rebound effect of other pieces of soft tissue being injured as well. Talk about padding issues a little bit, which is a hot topic in gyms because of the old standards that we apply to gyms. This is obviously a basketball lane. You can see it's quite wide, but you're only looking at 5 sections of paneling here. And you can see the other tile wall that certainly can be impacted by a basketball player that doesn't go directly into the driving layup. And certainly this is a concern, a problem that we have in padding in gyms. Here you see a trend. This happened to be our middle school where I had a case, and you can see the trend is basically to pad all the walls. And the rationale for that is we have a variety of games that take place in a gymnasium, not just basketball. And we're not always going in the north-south direction. We're sometimes going in the east-west direction. So therefore, it would behoove us to pad all the walls. The only wall that was not padded, you can't see it in this photograph very, very well, is to the far right. They had some bleachers there, some very low-tier bleachers. And they did provide some padding that you'll see in another shot for the lip of the bleachers. But essentially, all, except the doors, all the walls in this particular gym were padded, and it certainly was a compliment to the administration of the school to pad all their walls very well. The standard is, there's a standard actually for indoor wall padding, and it's the ASTM standard F2440-11. The standard, obviously, the number followed by the number is the year it was last revised. It was revised in April of 2011. And this is ASTM International out of West Conshohocken, PA. And many of you involved in a sports-type litigation issue, might want to check with ASTM if there's a standard that does exist for your particular matter of litigation. It's interesting to note on wall padding that they indicate that it should be no higher than 4 inches off the floor, so it's a very specific standard. You also have backboard issues that relate to padding. Here you have a backboard that has no padding on it whatsoever, and as I said before, in adult leagues and older leagues and so forth, where the youngsters are high school, college, and so forth, you need padding on the lower lip of this backboard because they'll hit their shoulders, their head, jam their hands, and so forth. So it's very important that you should have a pad underneath the backboard. And here you see one in a health fitness facility, the red outline that looks like the letter U outlined at the bottom of the backboard will protect somewhat in case of an injury. The older venues don't have sufficient space sometimes for the out-of-bounds line, what we call a buffer zone in these older facilities. Here you see a vertical plumb line going from the backboard down to the floor, the red area, and basically the basket would be 10 feet off the floor. That arrow is not up to 10 feet, but it's just pointing where the backboard is in the general vicinity. From that point, horizontally, to the out-of-bounds line, you should have 4 feet. In actuality, in this case, you could see it was 2 feet, 3 to 5/8 inches. From that point, from the out-of-bounds line, loosely put in the NCAA, and I think you'll find in the High School Federation as well, you'll see that they take a buffer zone of 3 to 10 feet. And that has been in existence perhaps for over 50 years, which is a very archaic kind of standard. In actuality, in this particular instance, it was 2 feet 8 inches. That is showing up well on your slide or not, but it's, trust me, it's 8 inches. So nevertheless, you should have, in actuality, a minimum from the basket to the wall of 4 feet plus 3 minimum. You should have at least 7 feet. And in many instances, you don't have that in a facility. And the problem is what to do if you don't have that in line. What can you do? Well, you can reconfigure the striping on your floor. You can move your baskets out. Of course, this is going to create some havoc with replacing them and putting them hanging off the wall in a different location, but it can be done. Certainly not without some expense, but certainly for safety reasons, because I do have some cases within my background that have students impacting the wall, and it's unfortunate that that occurs, that we have so many older facilities where students impact the wall. Obviously, padding will help, but you can see it's very minimal in this particular case and not nearly enough padding, because if you are driving for a basket and you go into that padding, certainly it's not going to protect you if you go to the left or right of it. You also have other issues with older gyms. This happens to be a school in New York City, and with older gyms, such as in New York or Boston, your older cities and towns around New England and throughout the United States that are relying on facilities that might be 50, 75, 100 years old. When I was teaching in an elementary school that was built in 1921, and certainly it was one of the only gyms in town at that particular time when it was built in 1921. I heard from the older custodian when I was a new teacher, a rookie coming in, that all the factory leagues used to play there and so forth, and he was quite proud of that gym. But as time moves on, obviously we have better gymnasiums. This particular gym in Bronx, New York, it was an elementary school. The youngster was doing a chase and flee game where they lined up at mid-court, and one half of the students would run in a south direction, and the other students would be chased after them and try to tag as many as they could. What happened in this particular instance, the girl was running for that black line, the end line, and that was a safety zone. She had to get over that line in time to be safe without being tagged. Unfortunately, the trigger was pushed and she was pushed into the wall. As you can see, it's a brick wall. The distance from the line to the wall was only 2 feet 8 inches. I thought it was going to be a slam dunk. I was on the plaintiff's behalf on this particular case. I thought it was a slam dunk type of case, only having 2 feet 8 inches to stop. And if you're running as fast as you can, certainly that's not nearly enough runoff area to stop safely. And we went to trial on the case. The two attorneys we briefed before we went into the trial, and we lost the case. The defendant, New York City Board of Education, prevailed in this case. And I was quite surprised at the verdict, and certainly in today's realm of things, sometimes juries aren't so, as you know, so liable to hand out verdicts that are complimentary toward the plaintiff. But I was quite surprised because it seemed to be a slam dunk to me. You're conducting a game in a gym with limited facilities. It could have been certainly done in a different fashion by just providing orange pylons and moving the orange cones out away from the wall and say, hey, look, 10 feet away, 12 feet away, this is where we're going to try to run to and stop. But to use a line that's only 2 feet 8 inches off the wall, it's foreseeable that somebody could impact that wall. And notice there's not a scrap of padding on that wall anywhere. And it was just a very unfortunate case. Dividing walls in gymnasiums sometimes work and they sometimes don't. Obviously, there are mechanical walls that fold out from the walls, and they provide, in a large gym like this, a venue on the right and a venue on the left. Therefore, as you can recall back to your high school days, you could have two activities going on at the same time, two classes going on at the same time, with a dividing wall in between. The problem is, sometimes when teachers use this half gym, again, they're playing very close to this wall as a buffer zone. In this particular instance, the green line that runs parallel to the dividing door and wall that's closest to that dividing wall certainly was the buffer zone in a game that was speedball that was brought indoors from outdoors. Actually, speedball to me is a combination of football, basketball, and soccer, and it really belongs initially outdoors. So adaptations sometimes are made by physical education teachers to bring some of these games indoors, and now when you compact it and reduce it down to the size not of a full gymnasium, but into a half gymnasium size, even if the number of players are going from, say, 11 to 6, you're still introducing a problem with a buffer zone if you're only playing 4 feet and 6 inches off the wall. That's what happened in this case. The boy went for the ball, dove for it, and he went right into the dividing wall and broke a clavicle collarbone. So it's an issue when you have divider doors that are not being appropriately used, dividing walls that are not being appropriately used for buffer zones. Here you see that same divider wall, and the hardware on the divider door, you can see there's a deadbolt there. And I have concerns with that because it does not permit access or egress from the opposite side of the deadbolt. Yes, we recognize why it's there. We don't want people coming from the opposite side into the space and opening the door into the space while students are involved in the activity and hurting them. But certainly it's a foreseeable hazard also to have any kind of metal on a door where it's at basically, head level where someone can run into it. So I have concerns, and it was not, I hazard a guess, not put there by the door company. It was after the fact that someone made a subsequent change on that door and introduced another hazard actually into the gymnasium. Curtains sometimes are used as dividers. Here you see two health fitness facilities. The one on the left has a basketball court, and out of view there's a swimming pool in this facility as well as a running track. And on the right, you can see a basketball court, and if you look very, very closely in the background, there are some cardio machines back there, ellipticals and treadmills. In this particular instance, the netting on the right-hand side did not divide off the court completely. When I viewed it, they did have netting all around the court, around the complete perimeter, but when the incident happened to this young female that was working out in this particular health fitness facility,
the netting did not go all the way around the court. And unfortunately, some youngsters were playing basketball, and the ball went bounding away off the court and into the cardio area and got lodged underneath her elliptical machine, at which point she was jarred and received a back injury. There is a standard that relates to this, that we should have dividers at any kind of projectile games, the curtains or dividers to divide off various sections of health fitness facilities. That's from the American College of Sports Medicine. And they're in their 4th edition right now with their particular standards and guidelines. So there's a reason why we have curtains in gyms like that. And certainly we have to be cautious that they're not hanging on the floor where someone can, go into them and trip as a tripping hazard. There's a slip hazard there. So curtains are very valuable in providing not as much the noise abatement, but certainly they work well as a divider at times, but not in this particular case because they didn't have it wrapped all the way around. Certainly state and local fire laws will be posted on most gymnasiums, and here you see 720 people can be occupied here at one time. I would say that in schools, many times that's violated because schools exceed the capacity of perhaps 720 students, or if it's 350, if it's an elementary school, and the principal will sometimes, to get in a full assembly, congregate all the students to come down class by class. Instead of sitting in folding chairs or whatever, they will have them sit on the floor, shoulder to shoulder, next to one another, and basically right on top of one another. And certainly this can be a problem in an evacuation with the students being so close to one another. The building code certainly we should be aware of right now is the International Building Code, the IBC. We no longer have the standard building code or the uniform building code or the BOCA, the BOCA National Building Code. The IBC has really taken over for all the codes, and this happened a few years back. We should be aware of the various codes, and of course they will be different from town to town, municipality to municipality, state to state, but we should be aware of these various codes. I'm going to touch a little bit upon some of the safety concerns that we have with tracks and tire from issues with fields and so forth, because right now you can see the track on the left is made out of rubber. It's not cinder. It's made out of rubber. And the field on your right, believe it or not, the grass, as well as the warning track, is a artificial synthetic surface. And we have to be concerned about this. I haven't heard of any litigation going forward in this area, but I'm sure there will be some in the future. But you might have one field that's the equivalent of 26,000 tires that they make it out of. And the concern was this emits chemicals from the tires, especially when it heats up and gets very, very warm. So the composition is in question. Risk Inc. in 2008 did a study on playgrounds and synthetic turfs, and they found that there was no adverse health effects. The University of Connecticut, my alma mater, I might say, a plug in here for the men's and women's basketball teams, champions this year. I'm quite proud of that. They did a study and tested 200 chemicals, and this was just a couple of years ago, I believe, and they found no elevated health risks on outdoor fields. However, they did recommend ventilation for indoor turf fields. So that was interesting to know. But there's been a controversy surrounding this, and I would advise you to keep abreast of that because this can change. It's very fluid in flux, and I'm sure other studies will come down in the future. But what I can find thus far is this University of Connecticut study that indicated that they tested 200 chemicals, and they found that there was no elevated health risk. And that was done by 4 agencies. I believe it was the Yukon Health Department and 3 other agencies within the University of Connecticut. We're going to talk a little bit about buffer zones as it relates to fields right now. Here you see a soccer field on that same track that we saw just a moment ago on the previous slide, and you can see there's 10 feet of buffer zone which would be required off the track. And this is unobstructed area around the perimeter of a soccer field where a youngster chasing the ball down would not be impacted by a tree or a movable bench or a fire hydrant or something of this nature. So it's very important that we have space around a soccer field to move. That's a safety cushion for students when they're playing or engaged in soccer. Here's a case that occurred where it was an old field. I was told it was about 100 years old. They had a whole concrete perimeter wall around the outside. You can see in the left-hand corner there is some yellow padding that did exist. However, the field itself was synthetic, and you see the overlapping lines for both football and soccer. He is in the end zone. The boy in the white shirt, it was a prep school actually that leased out this city field, and he's going for a touchdown reception, and you can just barely see the player behind him is the defender. It's kind of grainy because I took this off actually a video shot. You could also see in the track about the middle of the second lane there where a corner kick would be coming from for soccer. So it's two overlapping fields, multi-use fields, and unfortunately they took away, I believe, the concrete wall after the fact. But noting that the yellow padding is there, they're acknowledging the risk. And they're acknowledging a risk in that corner because they realize they don't have an appropriate buffer zone of 5 yards or 15 feet. And that's what it should be for a football field. Soccer 10 feet, football 15 feet. And certainly we should have all the way around that an unobstructed safety zone. And here you can see it's probably less than 3 feet off that flag. And the youngster impacted the wall, despite the fact he was wearing a football helmet, received a traumatic brain injury, and still was affected after he left prep school and went on to college. Unfortunate incident. It could have been remedied, certainly, by taking the concrete wall away, which they did after the fact, but to have it there, it just made no sense whatsoever. Getting into softball and baseball fields, you have different types of buffer zones. You have 25 feet to exist along foul lines and from the home plate to the back of the backstop. Here I'm measuring a softball field with my measuring tape to see if it complied with 25 feet. I did have an incident with the softball field where a young female in a recreational co-ed league was going for a pop foul ball and caught her cleat on fencing behind the backstop, behind home plate, and received a broken ankle after catching her cleats in the fencing. And there was an issue there of, I asked the attorney, does it comply with the safety zone of 25 feet? He really didn't know, and I went there and measured it. It did not. And the maintenance of the field, you'll get a common effect where you have curling of wire where they'll practice batting a ball into the wire backstop. And many times you'll see on a backstop no hitting here or no batting here or something of that nature because it does bow out the wire and it does create a catch if it's very low to the ground where people can catch their feet on that wire. It should be held off ground, should be tied in with wires, and it should be perfectly plumb and perpendicular. A baseball field, I didn't have a shot of a baseball field here, but the same type of concern, 60 feet minimum should exist for baseball fields from the foul lines to any type of obstruction. Here you have sometimes conflicting activities with fields. You have a field in the background and woods behind that, and you have a basketball backstop and a macadam area to shoot off of. And this occurred at an elementary school where a youngster was shooting baskets with his dad. He was in kindergarten, and a boy that was about 17 years old was in charge of this little group of players off to the side for Little League, and he was doing some batting practice for them. He was batting from the woods toward the blacktop, and you can guess what might have happened. The ball came over and hit the child in the head, and it impacted his skull half the distance of the baseball into his skull. That's how severe it was, the impact. Again, a traumatic brain injury. He was kindergarten at that time. It could have been easily remedied. This was not a regulation field by any stretch of the imagination. There was a field to the far left. There was another field or two to the far right. This was an outfield of one of the fields to the left, perhaps, and some dead space in between. Instead of batting toward the blacktop, another case of someone that jumped 17, not knowing about foreseeability, should have been batting toward the woods or batting parallel to the blacktop space. It was foreseeable that certainly someone could get hit if he was hitting it that hard toward the blacktop. So you have conflicting activities when you have activities that are so close in proximity to one another. Okay. Football, soccer goals. You can have football and soccer goals in combination with each other, and sometimes school districts will do this. Unanchored soccer goals from 1979 to 2008 killed 34 people in the United States, and 58 were seriously injured from tip-overs. Certainly something embedded in the ground like this does not tip over. It would be in concert with the regulations for football and soccer. Soccer goal being 8 yards, 24 feet. A football goal, I believe, is 23 feet, 6 inches. And they would certainly, one's a little less than the other, but both would apply as far as the National Federation is concerned. But we have to be careful because many times you drive by a field and you'll see a soccer goal out in the field, totally unprotected, and it's easy for children to do chin-offs off of it, up and down, and it is a concern of those tipping over and severely injuring someone. At this point in time, I think we'll entertain some questions.
Yes, we will, but before we start our questions, I would like all the attendees to check the passcode in the chat feature right now. Okay. So, Tom, we have a few questions here for you. One is a little lengthy. It's a scenario. So, can you address standards for the placement of heavy benches near the sidelines of high school football fields? Bench placed between 30 and 35-yard line and about 10 feet from the sidelines. It was unoccupied because of its location, even though there were 50 players dressed for the team on that sideline for this game. The injury occurred after making a catch and getting tackled while going out of bounds. The player's head struck the bench and the player lost consciousness. It appears that the bench was placed there to hold down the edge of the sideline tarp. Again, can you address the standards for the placement of heavy benches near the sidelines of high school football fields?
Well, again, we're looking at something that should not be in the area of 5 yards. What was the distance again?
It was between the 30 and 35-yard line, and it was 10 feet from the sideline.
Okay, 10 feet. Certainly, it's within, 10 feet is not 5 yards, obviously, not 15 feet. So I would say that this certainly was ill-placed. It should not have been there. It should have been pushed back another 5 feet, thereabouts, so it would provide more of a buffer zone, because anything within that realm of 5 yards, this type of accident can occur. Unfortunately, in this particular instance.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, can you please provide me with any authority where it states you have to have 10 feet on the side of the soccer field? We have a case where 2 soccer fields were close together and the referee was injured after he ran into a spectator. He claims the fields were too close together.
Okay, so they did not have the 10 feet between the 2 fields?
Right.
You should have 10 feet, certainly, I would say in that particular case, if they're parallel fields, that's why I'm certainly gathering from your question, if they're parallel fields, I would say that they would have, 20 feet in this particular instance, if they're parallel to each other. Certainly the 10 feet would not be appropriate if they're parallel to each other, in my opinion. You would have to consult with, if it's a high school game, you would consult with the rule book for the National Federation, or you can consult with the court and field diagram guide that's published by the National Federation of State High School Associations. The latest one was published in 2012, fall of 2012. They publish them every 2 years. but I would imagine another one will be forthcoming this coming fall, 2014. But in that particular book, they would point out the various court diagrams for lacrosse, soccer, football, etc., showing the safety buffer zones for all those activities. NCAA likewise would have their own rule books and so forth, and they would also have a guide to guide this attorney in, as well as facility planning and design for health, physical activity, recreation, and sport, the 13th edition by Thomas H. Sawyer, who's the editor-in-chief. He would be a good resource, a good book, rather, to consult. The last one was printed just this past year in 2013, and that would be an excellent source also for looking at field kinds of issues. So I hope I answered that question.
Great. Here's another one. I have a case against a national chain gym with a basketball court. Are sweat mops required for use for pickup basketball players to use?
I think it's a little muffled. I didn't quite. Can you repeat the question again?
Sure. It says, I have a case against a national chain gym with a basketball court. Are sweat mops required for use for pickup basketball players to use?
Or what is required for use? I'm sorry.
Sweat mops.
I don't understand the term.
I'm sure it's probably just a mop that you utilize, like in the gyms, when the players are sweating a lot.
Okay. I guess now. Okay, I wasn't quite catching. Is someone slipped and fell because of this issue?
Yes. Well, it doesn't say. It just says they have a case against a national chain gym with a basketball court, and the question was, are sweat mops required for use?
Okay. I don't know of any standard that would require that, but certainly it's common sense that I think that obviously if you're going to have a basketball venue and you're going to have participants that are sweating and perspiring, that you would, as an administration supervision issue, you would take the necessary precautions to do something about that. And I would assume that the administration would do something in their powers to have something available that would contain the situation.
Okay. And here's another question with regard to a private home basketball court. Are there any type of guidelines or restrictions with regard to like those driveway basketball courts at your home?
I don't know of any standard by ASTM for a home basketball court. There may be one, but I have not heard of one. You might want to check with ASTM because they have many, many standards out there, but I have never heard of one required for home backboards and backstops and how to set it up. I'm not knowledgeable about any in existence. There could be one, but I'm not knowledgeable about one.
Okay. And we have two more questions. Where do we find the rule that the bench must be 5 yards away in a football game?
You can look at the rule book for the National Federation, or the Court and Field Diagram Guide, the National Federation of State High School Associations, and that's put out by the National Federation of State High School Associations out of Indianapolis, Indiana, and their phone number is 317-972-6900. So it's 317-972-6900, and you could contact them and ask for their latest court and field diagram guide or their rule book on football, and it would indicate that it would be a 5-yard unobstructed area around a football field.
Great. Now, are the metal fences of baseball fields required to be padded?
They are treading toward padding or putting a piece of corrugated kind of pipe on the top area, because that's an area where someone with a clavicle shoulder can get injured. It's also an area where if the fence is not knuckled down appropriately, that obviously can create an issue. But I'm not aware of a strict padding area for high school or collegiate games as far as padding goes. It's a risk management technique. Obviously, in professional baseball, you have your outfields padded, but we're talking about different levels here, and from Little League to Babe Ruth to high school to college to professional ball. So what's provided at one level is not necessarily provided at another level obviously. I'm not aware of a strict requirement at the younger levels where padding is required. But as I say, the top rail of a fence is usually padded with a corrugated kind of pipe cover for safety, as well as aiding the umpire to see if the ball goes over the fence. But it's mostly a safety issue.
Okay, great. So we will proceed. So Tom, go ahead.
Okay, very good. And we'll finish up because the second section is not as long as the first. We're going to talk a little bit about bleachers, the types of bleachers, the issues with bleachers for indoor and outdoor and movable and permanent bleachers in this section. The risk areas here, certainly you have a bleacher here that's probably about 10, 12 rows high. They're obviously pushed in at this point in time in this particular high school gymnasium, and they're a danger because students will tend to scale those. In fact, in spite of the fact that they're pushed in, they will try to gain a toehold, and go up if there's a badminton bird or a basketball or whatever that's in the top of those bleachers that get caught. They'll try to scale those. I was a director of intramurals and recreation at a state university in Connecticut at one point in time as an adjunct, and students would try to scale those. And if you're talking about a college basketball court, they could be 20 rows high or thereabouts, and it's quite a distance if someone falls down from a liability standpoint. So they should be pushed in. You should have supervision at all times, and not obviously having students to climb up to the top of those, which is a danger from a supervision standpoint. The risk issue is using bleachers for storage. You can see there's a couple of goals on the sidelines over here on this middle school gym, very, very short bleachers, maybe only 3 or 4 rows. But if they're not secure, just slung up there for an easy way to store them during a non-activity time, they can topple over easily on a child, injuring them. So we should be very aware of goals that are used, or any types of supplies or pieces of equipment stored on top of bleachers. Here you see a shot of the bleachers I previously mentioned in the first section, that padding was not on the other wall, but what they did do in this particular instance, the black panels were placed on top of the edges, and this provided, these were made for this type of bleacher when they pushed in, and you can see they're not in use here. They're behind where they actually ought to be and should be. We have inadequate guardrails. This is taken directly from the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. We know that in 1999, 2 children died of injuries from falls from bleachers. There was 22,100 injuries. A 6-year-old fell through a 13-inch opening of the seatboard and footboard, as well as a 3-year-old falling through the opening in the guardrail. Here you can see a child can fall very easily from the top of the bleachers off the backside, or a child can fall from the side. And this is an issue that we had with bleachers approximately 15 years ago, until we had some safer bleacher designs come into effect. Here you have exactly what we're talking about in the previous slide, the schematic from the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. We have inadequate guardrails at the top, where a child can fall off very easily, and from the side. You also have, additionally to that, you have some decaying wood steps on this particular bleacher system. Here you have something that's a little bit more appropriate. You have complete enclosed back to the bleachers, sides of the bleachers. You have a aisle going up with a handrail, certainly safer than the previous slide that we just showed a moment ago. This was an issue with bleachers. Sometimes this is the fencing that was coming down along the aisles, and it was not meant to be a handrail for an aisle. But nevertheless, you have an issue here with the maintenance and installation inspection issue, because this was not obviously maintained correctly. It wasn't installed correctly. If inspections caught this, they would have knuckled it down and bent it over. And the end result on this particular case was an amputated little finger of a high school youngster. So for safety, wires should be knuckled over for complete safety. And here you can see a safer version of a handrail, perhaps, with all the wires are knuckled over. They're a little bit below the spacing of the handrail, so it's not going to be an issue of someone catching their finger and amputating a finger when they jump off the bleachers. You have telescoping issues with indoor types of bleachers where they don't completely close sometimes. They protrude into the space. So they're old, archaic bleachers, as in this particular case. The International Code Council will indicate that you should inspect bleachers one time per year. However, the Consumer Product Safety Commission publication number 330 indicates quarterly. And I would say that depending on how much use you get out of your bleachers, certainly quarterly would be, in my book, a safer way to go about doing an inspection. Permanent bleachers on the outside will obviously resist, if they're aluminum, resist the weather. They should be, any kind of material used outdoors should be, if you're using wood, should be resistant to rot. The factors should be types that are resistant to the weather conditions. So you can use wood. And this all came about, all the bleacher scenario here, through the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission 1999 reacting, unfortunately, to these two deaths that we did have. And then the state of Minnesota was one of the first states to develop their own code, and then we have the International Code Council in the latest version as 2012 standards for bleachers, folding, and telescopic seating, and grandstands. And if you have a bleacher case, I would advise you to get a hold of that particular standard because that addresses the standard of bleachers. I want to address very, very quickly, I'm not an aquatic expert, but I thought, in view of the fact that I reside part of the year in Connecticut, that I would address two hot-button topics. One is concussions. We're not going to address that today. But the other hot-button topic is aquatic accidents, and this happened in Connecticut, which some of you from out of state may or may not have heard of our accidents here in Connecticut. One happened in January of 2012. The other occurred in November of 2012 in contiguous towns. East Hartford is contiguous to Manchester, Connecticut. And in both instances, it involved boys who were from Ghana, Africa, and they were not swimmers. We have a new state law in effect in Connecticut dealing with supervision. It's Public Act 13-161, which basically indicates that if you have a physical education class, you have a interscholastic swim meet, or if you have an extracurricular kind of recreational swim, you have to have another pair of eyes in that pool at all times. So you have to have two adults in the pool at all times. I had a class once I was supervising for a student teacher, and I asked the student teacher after he did his lesson in the pool, I asked him, how many students did you have in your pool today? And he said, I think, which is the wrong thing to say, I think. He should have been more demonstrative and said it with assurance. But he said, I think I had 17. I said, no, you did not have 17. You had 17 swimmers. You had 2 non-swimmers in the corner, and one that did not dress out. You had 20 in your class. So the importance of knowing at all times, whether it be swimming or any kind of activity, how many are in your class is critical to a situation. There was a $1.5 million settlement settled out of court in East Hartford, Connecticut. It was $1.725 million settlement in Manchester drowning. The tragic thing in Manchester, the boy was underwater for 17 minutes. The teacher was not criminally liable for what occurred. There were 20 students in the pool. At the time, the police reviewed the surveillance tape footage of the pool, and they indicated that the splashing and diving of students and the overhead lights created this glare on the water that nobody really discerned that this young man in Manchester was under the water for 17 minutes. But a very tragic case here in Manchester, Connecticut. Fitness areas are driven by the American College of Sports Medicine Standards, the National Strength and Conditioning Standards, and the American Society for Testing and Materials International Standard. Treadmills should have on each side of them 19.7 inches of space and behind 78 inches of space. And many times in health fitness facilities, this is not noted. I would call your attention to the power strip going across the green carpeting from the first row of treadmills to the second row, and then you can see it actually going to the track area. So this is a dangerous area if you have trip areas for electrical cords on areas. Three conflicting areas in this situation. You have a track or pool to the right where it's glassed in, and you have a basketball court. Many times your older tennis courts would kind of morph into health fitness facilities. They would take and drop down a basketball court, and you can see the ridge around that basketball court. And another facility, it's not the same one, but another facility where they kind of morphed a tennis court into a health fitness facility. This is raised up a good 1.5 inches. I'm not going to the top of the ruler, but I'm going to the bottom of that yellow ruler. You can see it's a good 1.5 inches above the present grade. In summary, because I know we're only a couple of minutes for questions and answers, we have various agencies setting the standard of care within the industry. And many times, it's a standard of practice that could prevail if there is no agency out there setting the standard of care. That's what's prevalent within the area, and that's what people do. Sometimes the standard of practice sets the precedent. Unfortunately, we always should strive for the standard of care. We have buffer zones for gymnasium fields and courts, so we have to consult with the various agencies, the NCAA, the National Federation of State High School Associations for the appropriate distances. We have bleacher standards by the ICC. We have aquatic issues that are out there, and Connecticut being a forerunner with, unfortunately, this is how, as you all recognize, legislation sometimes goes forward after a tragic accident occurs, and that's exactly what happened here in Connecticut. And you have health and fitness issues where equipment is sometimes crowded into small spaces. I would say that, according to the late Dr. Betty Vandersmith, that ignorance of such standards is no excuse for failing to comply. With that, I'll turn it back over, and might entertain a question or two.
Yes, we have a few questions for you, Tom. Here's a scenario with a follow-up question. There's a basketball goal placed at the edge of a motel parking lot. The patrons fell on the layup because of the changing ground elevation. Are there any standards or guidelines on placement of the basketball goal on or near a parking lot?
Well, again, you'd have to look at apply the standards for the buffer zone that I was explaining before, that if you have a goal, you should, out of bounds, have, ideally, you should have 4 feet, which would be, ideally would be the end line of a basketball court, and then you should have another 3 feet to anything of that nature. This being a motel, a little different scenario than an outdoor court than an indoor court, but certainly common sense would indicate that you would have an appropriate buffer zone. You wouldn't have a drop-off or fall-off where someone's going to break an ankle, hurt their leg out of situations such as this. So outdoor courts should certainly have enough buffer zone in addition to as opposed to an indoor court. Certainly you should have enough safety space cushion so someone is not dropping off dramatically.
Great. Before I go to the next question, could all the attendees type in the TASA code in the chat feature for me, please? Great. Okay, our next question. Can you address the standard for the construction of chain link fences, i.e. the yellow corrugated pipe along the top, painting the fence to increase visibility and avoid collision, running a stabilizing wire through the bottom along a baseball foul line?
Okay, the fencing is covered by ASTM. There's a whole raft of fencing standards that are applied to fencing from ASTM. It's an ongoing committee. They would have standards for various chain link fence and so forth that I refer the person who posed the question to ASTM for the various standards for fencing issues.
Okay. Is the 10-foot buffer for soccer fields applicable to indoor venues?
I'm not sure of that. Certainly, I don't know answers to everything here this afternoon. I'm not sure of that. I would hold judgment on that if the person who posed the question would drop me an email. I'd try to get back to them on that particular issue. Indoor venue might be something a little bit different, but certainly the more buffer zone that you can provide, even if it's indoors, the safer it would be. Certainly I realize the fact that you're limited in space indoors, but obviously if you're only having a 2-foot buffer zone, you're playing soccer, the student or athlete runs out of bounds, you're going to impact the wall. But I would reserve judgment on that, answering that question, because I don't know at this point in time. I'd have to look into that and research that one out.
Okay, great. Those were all the questions that we... here comes another question. I'm sorry. Any standards for portable scoreboards used outside regarding anchoring to prevent tipping?
Tipping on a portable scoreboard? I'm not aware of any standard at this point in time. I have to do research, on that. These are all good questions, but I'm not an encyclopedia that I can answer every question, every concern, but that's another good question. If the person that posed it would like to drop me their email or whatever, I would try to get back to them on that after doing some research. But I'm not aware of a standard at this point in time. I'm totally ignorant of that area.
Okay, great. I have noted those individuals. This concludes our program for today. Again, we will be sending out the PowerPoint presentation tomorrow morning. If anyone has any questions, feel free to respond back to the email that I'm going to send out. I did want to take the opportunity to thank our expert, Mr. Tom Bowler. And I did want to say that this webinar is eligible for CLE credit in California, Illinois, Minnesota, Missouri, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Texas. To ensure you receive your CLE credit, please complete the survey at the end of this presentation that will pop up on your screen. In addition to being your best source for testifying and consulting experts, TASA also offers e-discovery and document management solutions, free interactive webinars, and research reports on expert witnesses. If any of you would like to contact the TASA Group, please contact us at 1-800-523-2319. And at this time, we will conclude the presentation. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.